Have you ever wondered what truly fuels the world's most successful entrepreneurs? I mean, really gets them going.
It's often not what you think.
Exactly. Today, we're taking an extraordinary deep dive into the mind of one of them, Jeff Bezos. But here's the twist we're exploring. We're going to uncover how he didn't just succeed despite his fears, but often, paradoxically, because of them.
It's a fascinating lens, isn't it, to view his journey that way. This deep dive, it's not just a biography. Think of it more like a masterclass in strategic decision-making.
Yeah.
We'll unpack Bezos' career, from the garage origins of Amazon right up to blue origins, well, frankly, audacious space ambitions.
Right.
And we'll show how specific fears at each stage didn't just hang around, they actively drove his most monumental successes.
Totally. We've actually charted out 7 distinct phases. And for each one, we're going to reveal the clear signs of his fears, the, sometimes unexpected benefits they brought, how we applied these lessons practically, the competitors he was navigating around.
Always competitors.
Always. And most importantly, some invaluable insights you can leverage. So get ready for some serious aha moments, because this really is about turning those potential obstacles into powerful motivators for your own vision.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. Back in 1994, we're calling this the Genesis phase, and it really centers around Bezos's fear of regret, of inaction.
The classic what if.
Right. He was this well-paid vice president at D.E. Shaw & Co., big finance job, and he's facing this massive choice. Stay secure, keep the money flowing, or take this huge leap into the completely unknown internet.
Which was tiny then, relatively speaking.
Tiny. And his decision to quit, launch Amazon.com from his garage.
Yeah.
It was a calculated risk, sure, but he explicitly said it was driven by this deep fear of omission, the fear of just not trying.
And what's really illuminating here, I think, is the discipline he brought to that fear. It wasn't just a gut feeling. He actually lacked a framework for a decision this big, so he, engineered one.
The regret minimization framework.
Exactly. His famous regret minimization framework. He'd literally project himself forward. Imagine being 80 years old looking back and asking himself which path would lead to fewer regrets. It wasn't vague, it was methodical, and it created this clear bias for action.
So it pushed him past the analysis paralysis stage.
Completely. He even told his parents, very candidly, he estimated a 70% chance of failure, which shows, a remarkably clear-eyed view of the high stakes. He wasn't naive.
Okay, that disciplined approach, it sounds great on paper. But what were the actual, tangible benefits early on from tackling that huge decision with that framework?
Well, the biggest one was definitely overcoming that analysis paralysis. While others might have debated endlessly, maybe waited for more data,
Right.
His fear of not acting forced him to be decisive. He seized the internet opportunity right then, and that meant super early market entry for Amazon.
How early?
Selling books in 45 countries within just 30 days of launch.
Wow. Okay.
And crucially, choosing books wasn't random. It was strategic. They're a standardized commodity, easy to ship. That was absolutely essential for an unknown online shop trying to build customer trust from scratch.
Makes sense. And in terms of applying this fear day to day, how did it show up in his actions?
Oh, it was incredibly practical. First, he actually left the VP job in '94. He used the framework, even though his boss tried to talk him out of it.
He really walked away.
Walked away, drove across the country to Seattle himself, got the Amazon.com domain, started coding in his garage. Then that methodical part kicks in again. He evaluated 20 different product categories.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah, before landing on books. Not just because people read books, but specifically for their standardized nature. Ideal for those first online sales.
So at this very early stage, who was he actually competing against? It wasn't just other websites, was it?
No, it was a battle on multiple fronts, really. First, you have D.E. Shaw & Co. itself, representing that safe, lucrative path he rejected.
The road not taken.
Exactly. Then, obviously, the big traditional booksellers, Barnes & Noble, Borders, they were giants. And finally, a whole swarm of other early online ventures all scrambling for a piece of this new digital pie.
So looking back at just this initial phase, what's the core lesson here for you listening, for any entrepreneur?
I think it's about embracing that fear of omission as your most powerful decision filter. Bezos's fear of future regret wasn't just about avoiding bad feelings.
Right.
It forced this radical clarity. It cut through the noise, the analysis paralysis. It really shows that sometimes the biggest risk is just doing nothing. especially when you see these huge, maybe scary, but potentially transformative shifts happening.
So have that bias for action.
Have that bias for action, absolutely. Understand that waiting for perfect information, well, that can be a bigger trap than the uncertainty itself.
Okay, that sets the stage perfectly for the launch. But then Amazon goes public in 97. Things change. A new fear starts to dominate.
Oh, definitely.
This is what we're calling the early growth phase, say 97 to the early 2000s. And the fear shifts massively towards customer dissatisfaction, losing loyalty.
The terror of the customer.
Exactly. Amazon starts diversifying beyond books. But Bezos famously avoids big marketing spends. He relies almost entirely on word of mouth, driven by amazing customer experience. He literally told employees, be afraid. Wake up every morning terrified.
Oh, terrified of who?
Not of our competition, he said, but of our customers.
And that was truly an obsession. Almost extreme, you could say. He openly called this customer obsession Amazon's biggest competitive advantage.
Bigger than tech, bigger than price.
He believed so. He skipped the big ad campaigns because he was convinced a product or service worth talking about was the best, the only real growth driver. And he was famously very comfortable being misunderstood.
Meaning
He'd prioritize long-term customer happiness, loyalty, over hitting short-term profit targets. That was pretty radical back then. Wall Street wasn't always thrilled.
I bet. But what were the payoffs? What did that seemingly maybe irrational focus actually deliver?
Well, it created this almost unassailable competitive edge in customer service that directly fueled their sustained market leadership. It also meant organic growth, sustainable growth.
Through word of mouth.
Through positive word of mouth, which is, probably the most cost-effective and authentic way to expand. And crucially, it built deep, lasting trust, reputation, through radical transparency.
Like the reviews.
Exactly. Defending the inclusion of customer reviews, even the really negative ones right there on the product page. That built incredible credibility.
So how did that intense fear of, upsetting the customer translate into actual things Amazon did, into their operations?
The applications were revolutionary for the time. He empowered customers with those detailed ratings and reviews and, like we said, defended the bad ones as vital data. Feedback.
Okay.
He pursued this explicit charge less philosophy, constantly finding ways to cut costs, boost efficiency, just so he could lower prices for customers.
Passing savings on.
Always. And he pushed that bias for action down through the whole company, encouraged employees to err on the side of action. That culture led directly to things like one-click shopping. Huge innovation.
So when we think about competitors in this phase, given this crazy customer focus, who was he really worried about?
Well, sure, the traditional retailers like Barnes & Noble were still players. But maybe more acutely, he was aware of the rise of social networks, even early on. He understood the power and the fear of negative word of mouth spreading like wildfire.
Oh, interesting.
Ultimately, though, his deepest concern probably wasn't one specific company. It was any rival, big or small, that might somehow offer better service, a better experience. That was the real threat.
So the key takeaway for you listening right now from this customer-obsessed period.
Let customer terror, as strange as that sounds, define your competitive edge. Bezos' unique fear of customers wasn't just about, being polite. It was extreme, almost irrational. And that obsession led him to prioritize long-term satisfaction way above short-term profits, which built this incredible advantage through organic word of mouth when most rivals were just throwing money at ads. It proves that a relentless, almost scary focus on the customer, that can be your most powerful differentiator.
That intense customer focus definitely fueled the early growth. But then what happens when the whole playground catches fire? The dot-com bubble bursts.
Right, early 2000s. Carnage.
Exactly. That's when Bezos faced his next really big fear. Short-term financial pressure, market collapse. Countless internet darlings just poof, imploded.
Pets.com, Cosmo.com, the list goes on.
Yet Amazon survived. And not just survived, but thrived later. Why? Well, Bezos pointed to his unusually slow-paced business plan, prioritizing reinvesting revenue, keeping prices low.
And focusing relentlessly on one key metric.
Free cash flow, not traditional accounting profits. He hammered this home to shareholders constantly. Remember his 2000 shareholder letter? Started with just one word.
Ouch. Yeah, after the stock dropped 80%, but he immediately pivoted.
Right, to focus on the long-term strength, the underlying fundamentals.
This period really cemented Amazon's financial discipline, and it absolutely came from a deep fear of financial fragility, of running out of runway. He deliberately picked free cash flow as his North Star, even when it looked different from standard GAAP earnings.
The usual accounting profits.
Exactly. And he was just unwavering in telling investors, this is how we measure success. His long-term investment strategy meant, yeah, they didn't show big profits for over 6 years.
6 years.
6 years building that foundation. And it allowed him to make these incredibly risky judgment-based bets later, like Amazon Prime in 2005.
Based on intuition.
Pure intuition that it would be amazing for customers, even when the internal spreadsheets, the financial models, apparently screamed it was a terrible idea.
It's easy to talk about long-term thinking now looking back. But during the actual dot-com crash, staying that course must have been incredibly hard. What were the real advantages Amazon got from that financial discipline when so many others were just vanishing?
Well, that fear-driven discipline, that meticulous cash management, it meant Amazon didn't just survive the bust. They emerged way stronger. They could snap up market share from all the failed competitors.
Right.
Having strong free cash flow gave them the money, the capital for continuous innovation. They weren't slaves to short-term payoff demands.
They could keep building.
Keep building. And that bold, intuition-led bet on Prime, it didn't just deepen loyalty, it fundamentally changed the customer relationship. People started buying way more often. It was transformative.
How did he put that financial focus into practice day to day? What did it look like inside Amazon?
Okay, first, that aggressive reinvestment strategy was key. Plow revenue back in. Keep prices low, expand operations. Fuel growth, don't just bank profit.
Okay.
Second, he optimized their operating cycles like crazy. Super fast inventory turnover. Collect cash from customers before you have to pay your suppliers. That minimizes tied up capital, maximizes cash flow. That's the cash mode he talked about.
Ah, the cash mode.
Yep. And third, remarkably consistent communication with shareholders. He kept enclosing his original 1997 letter in later reports, just relentlessly reinforcing that long-term philosophy, managing expectations through transparency.
So thinking about competitors during this crisis time, it wasn't just other dot-coms, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, yes, he was battling the fallout, seeing companies like Pets.com and Cosmo just flame out. Traditional retailers were still there, struggling to match the prices and the reinvestment. But a huge competitor, in a sense, was the short-term thinking itself.
You mean from investors?
From investors, analysts.
Yeah.
The constant pressure for quick profits. Bezos deliberately and often defiantly pushed back against that. He was competing against short-termism.
Okay, so what's the core lesson for you from how Amazon navigated that financial storm?
It's really to optimize for cash flow resilience, not just fleeting profits on paper. This phase powerfully shows that free cash flow, not just the reported earnings number, is the true lifeblood. It measures your long-term value, your ability to innovate, especially when things get rough.
So patience is key.
Patience for profitability, yes. Be willing to defer those short-term gains if it means building sustainable long-term leadership. And have the courage, the conviction to make bold moves that you know will benefit customers, even if the spreadsheets don't immediately cheer you on. Trust that customer-centric judgment.
Okay, from surviving crisis, we shift gears into a period of really aggressive expansion and innovation. Let's talk mid-2000s to early 2010s. This phase feels defined by Bezos' deep fear of stagnation, of not inventing fast enough.
Day two, as he'd later call it, the fear of becoming irrelevant.
Exactly. This is when Amazon really cemented its reputation as an innovation machine. He launches Kindle in 2007, sells out in hours, transforms internal tech into AWS, Amazon Web Services.
Which becomes the profit engine.
Huge profit engine. And he champions these self-service platforms like Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP for authors, Fulfillment by Amazon FBA for sellers, all driven by this belief that, quote, even well-meaning gatekeepers slow innovation.
This whole era is just a testament to his proactive stance, right? Directly fueled by that fear of standing still, of missing the next big thing. He pushed for Kindle, for AWS things customers weren't actually asking for.
Right, they didn't know they needed them yet.
Exactly. He had the intuition they'd provide immense value. That shows a deep fear of just being reactive, of complacency. He wasn't aiming for incremental improvements. He wanted fundamental change. Better than physical books, better than traditional publishing, radical transformation.
And the platforms, KDP, FBA.
That reflects his insistence that innovation needed to be decentralized. It should come from a large, inventive team, empowered by tools, by platforms. That shows a clear fear of centralized bottlenecks, just stifling
The
creativity.
results of pouring energy into that proactive invention.
The benefits.
Oh, they were absolutely monumental.
Yeah.
It led straight to creating these massive, diverse, new revenue streams. Kindle and especially AWS, which just grew into this incredibly profitable engine for the whole company.
It massively expanded Amazon's ecosystem, its network effects. KDP and FBA created these win-win situations for millions of third-party developers, authors, merchants, weaving Amazon even deeper into the fabric of the digital economy.
Yeah, the marketplace.
The marketplace, exactly.
Yeah.
And crucially, it embedded this culture of proactive invention deep within Amazon, ensuring they stayed not just current, but actually ahead of customer needs, ahead of market trends.
Can you walk us through how he actually applied this fear of stagnation? How did they approach innovation?
Sure. For Kindle, they famously used that work backwards method. They didn't start with the tech they had. They started with the customer dream. Any book accessed in less than 60 seconds. An audacious vision.
Totally.
And then they figured out the technology needed to make that happen. It's customer-centric innovation to the extreme. He also actively cultivated what he called missionaries, people genuinely passionate about disrupting an industry. People who deeply understood the appeal of the old ways they were trying to overturn, so they knew what they were up against. And then the masterstroke with AWS.
Taking internal tools external.
Exactly. Transforming Amazon's own internal infrastructure, built out of necessity for their own massive scale, into a powerful, scalable service they could offer to anyone. Genius.
So who were the major players Amazon was competing with, or maybe more accurately, just completely disrupting during this period?
Well, traditional book publishers and retailers like Barnes & Noble were obviously fundamentally challenged by Kindle and KDP. You had some dedicated e-reader makers like Sony, Barnes & Noble's own Nook.
Right, then no.
But Kindle really dominated. And then in cloud computing, there were emerging providers, but honestly, AWS pretty much created and then dominated that market incredibly early on. They were competing against the old way of doing IT infrastructure.
So for you, the entrepreneur listening, what's the key lesson from this innovation powerhouse phase?
It's really about inventing on your customer's behalf. Don't just wait for them to tell you what they want. Anticipate their future needs. Build solutions they don't even know they need yet.
Be proactive.
Be proactive. And empower others through platforms. Creating self-service tools like KDP or FBA can unlock exponential growth and innovation. It turns your business into an ecosystem, not just a single product. And finally, integrate R&D everywhere. Innovation shouldn't be stuck in one department. It needs to permeate every single part of the business.
Okay, so Amazon becomes this true behemoth.
Yeah.
And that brings a new fear, right? As companies get huge, they often get slow, bureaucratic.
The dreaded day two.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mid-2010s, Bezos becomes obsessed with preventing day two. He described it vividly. Stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty dramatic. But it shows the depth of his fear.
Absolutely. This was his deep-seated fear of bureaucracy, of complacency setting in, and he fought it with his famous day one culture. Constant emphasis on speed, customer obsession, bold innovation, and specific mechanisms to keep that alive.
Things like the two pizza teams, the one-way, two-way door decisions. And he famously embraced failure as part of the process. Failure and invention are inseparable twins, he said. He even pointed to big missteps like the Fire Phone as learning experiences.
That deep fear of day two, it drove this constant vigilance, a relentless push to maintain startup agility inside a giant corporation. He had this radical acceptance of failure and experiments. He literally said, if you know in advance that it's going to work, it's not an experiment.
He wanted real experiments, real risk.
Real risk, yes.
Yeah.
Because that's where invention happens. And he insisted on relentlessly high standards, standards many found unreasonably high. Why? Because he had this profound fear of quality just naturally declining as the company scaled up.
So how did that constant battle against day two, against getting slow and complacent, actually benefit Amazon? What were the results?
Well, it allowed for sustained innovation, even at massive scale. They could develop entirely new hit products like Echo and Alexa, directly applying lessons learned from the, frankly, disastrous Fire Phone.
Turning failure into success.
Exactly. It fostered incredible operational agility. Those mechanisms, like two pizza teams and the one-way, two-way door framework, kept decision-making fast, even as they grew huge.
Decentralized speed.
Right. And ultimately, it led to consistently high-quality results, delivering superior products, superior services, defying that typical corporate bloat and decline.
Can you give us some concrete examples?
Yeah.
How did he apply this day one thinking on the ground?
Okay, two pizza teams. Simple concept, profound impact. Keep teams small enough that two pizzas can feed them. That promotes efficiency, ownership, autonomy.
Less bureaucracy.
Far less. Then the one-way, two-way door framework. This was brilliant. Categorize decisions. Is it easily reversible, like walking back through a door that's a two-way door? Make that decision quickly with a small team. But if it's irreversible, a one-way door, like launching a major new product line, then you deliberate more carefully, involve more senior people. It allows for speed and discipline and learning from missteps. He didn't sweep the Fire Phone under the rug. He publicly called it a necessary failure that taught them invaluable lessons, directly informing the development of Alexa and Echo.
So who are the competitors during this phase? It wasn't just about specific companies anymore, was it?
Not entirely. His primary competitor, in a way, was that inherent tendency of any large established company to just get slow, get bureaucratic. Think about the fate of Blockbuster or Sears. That's what he was fighting against.
The ghost of corporations past.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But of course, there were direct competitors emerging in the new spaces they entered. Google was coming out with smart home devices, Google Home. Apple had Apple TV. So, real rivals, too.
What's the essential lesson for you listening from Bezos' relentless fight to stay in day one?
It's that you have to actively combat day two complacency. It doesn't happen automatically. You need to implement specific cultural and operational mechanisms to keep that startup energy, that dynamism, alive, no matter how big you get.
Be intentional about it.
Very intentional. Empower fast, decentralized decisions. Push authority down to small, autonomous teams. Use frameworks like the one-way, two-way door to manage risk and speed. And maybe most importantly, reframe failure. See it as a competitive advantage.
How so?
Because if you learn from it faster than others, if you see it as an inevitable part of invention, not something to be hidden or punished, that's how you drive future breakthroughs. Make failure a valuable data point.
Okay, that brings us closer to the present. Late 2010s, early 2020s. Amazon's empire is vast, and we start to see Bezos' influence broaden even further. This reflects what we're identifying as maybe a fear of limited societal impact.
Moving beyond just commerce.
Yes, exactly. 2017, they acquire Whole Foods for $13.7 billion. Huge move into physical retail.
Yeah.
Bezos had personally bought the Washington Post back in 2013 for $250 million, and he got deeply involved in its digital turnaround.
Applying Amazon thinking to media?
Totally. Then come the massive philanthropic efforts. The Bezos Day One Fund in 2018, tackling homelessness and education. The Bezos Earth Fund in 2020, pledging $10 billion for climate change. And even internally, Amazon raises its minimum wage to $15 an hour in the U.S. in 2018, partly responding to significant public pressure.
Yeah, this was definitely a strategic expansion of his influence, and you can see that underlying apprehension maybe of just being the everything store guy. He made these proactive moves into adjacent markets, groceries with Whole Foods, media with the Post. It leveraged Amazon's strengths, but clearly signaled, I think, a fear of being siloed.
Didn't want to be just one thing.
Right. And then using his personal wealth, his vast capital, for broader impact, buying the Post, funding these huge philanthropic funds. That shows a very deliberate choice to wield influence beyond Amazon's core business, maybe stemming from a fear of not contributing meaningfully enough to society, given his resources.
Like responding to pressure, the wage increase.
In showing a willingness to engage with that public and political pressure. Yeah. Raising the minimum wage was a clear sign of recognizing and responding to those broader societal expectations. You could see it as adapting.
So what were the tangible benefits that came out of this diversification, this broader engagement with society?
Well, first, a truly comprehensive market presence across completely new sectors, physical retail, influential media. That significantly expanded Amazon's and Bezos's reach.
Okay.
Second, much broader societal influence. By tackling issues like homelessness, climate change, journalism's future, it definitely enhanced public perception, both of the company and of him personally, though not without controversy, of course. And third, it demonstrated this adaptability, responsiveness to the changing social landscape, which might have helped preempt some regulatory actions and certainly aimed to improve employee relations.
How did he apply this, let's call it fear of limited impact, practically? across these different ventures?
Okay, with Whole Foods, you see strategic vertical integration. It wasn't just buying stores, it was about supply chain control, customer convenience, enabling things like 2-hour grocery delivery.
Using Amazon's logistics power.
Exactly.
Right.
With his personal fortune, he very deliberately allocated billions to philanthropy through structured funds, the Day One Fund, the Earth Fund, targeting specific big problems. And with the Washington Post, he didn't just buy it and let it run. He infused Amazon's culture.
Oh.
Tech-first thinking, customer-centric mindset. He significantly boosted their tech staff, pushing them hard on digital transformation, applying the Amazon playbook.
Who are the competitors or maybe the forces he was navigating during this period of broadened influence?
Well, you had the traditional grocery chains, obviously, facing this new giant competitor. Legacy media companies were watching the post-transformation closely. But crucially, a major force here was activist groups and rising public pressure.
Pushing on worker rights, corporate responsibility.
Exactly. Amazon and Bezos were directly engaging with those forces, whether proactively or reactively. That was a key part of the landscape.
So what's the key lesson for you from this phase, when the company gets huge and starts looking outward?
It's maybe about proactive diversification into adjacent markets. Don't just stay in your lane forever. Look for opportunities to expand using the strength and capabilities you've already built.
Leverage what you have.
Right, and embrace social responsibility as you grow. Understand that addressing societal challenges isn't just, nice PR. It's becoming crucial for brand reputation, for long-term sustainability. And finally, recognize that personal investments, if you have the means, can yield incredibly broad influence, letting you extend your impact far beyond just your main company.
Which brings us right up to the present, the 2020s and beyond. And arguably, Bezos' most audacious move yet. His ultimate fear, perhaps.
Fear for humanity's future, maybe.
That seems to be it. In 2021, he steps down as Amazon CEO, becomes executive chairman. Why? Specifically to dedicate more time to Blue Origin, his aerospace company.
His childhood dream.
His childhood dream, now his main focus. And Blue Origin's goal is just mind-bogglingly ambitious. Make space travel accessible, eventually enable humanity to live in huge, free-floating space colonies to sustain future growth. This whole thing seems driven by a profound fear of humanity hitting limits, of stasis right here on Earth.
Yeah, he's openly infusing Amazon's hard-driving culture into Blue Origin now because he genuinely seems to believe that stasis and rationing are the only options if we stay confined to this planet. It's an existential fear, almost.
It really feels like his magnum opus. This lifelong obsession with space is now his main job. It's fueled by this deep personal conviction that we have to overcome Earth's perceived limitations.
And that vision, trillions of humans living off-world, it's just unparalleled ambition, rooted in that fundamental fear of stagnation, not just for a company this time, but for the entire human species.
Right. And even after building Amazon, one of the biggest companies ever, he says he's not near the end of the story. He's driven to make history with Blue Origin. It's this audacious drive for legacy, maybe overcoming a fear of unfulfilled potential even for him.
Even for him.
So what are the projected benefits? I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but what's the goal here?
Well, his direct involvement, pouring that intense Amazon culture in, the goal is absolutely to speed up Blue Origin's progress, make it more competitive in a notoriously difficult, expensive industry.
Good.
The super long-term vision, the colonies, that's about fundamentally addressing resource limits, growth limits, by expanding civilization into space. The potential societal and economic impact is monumental, if decades or centuries away.
If it works.
If it works. And for now, his sheer ambition, his personal commitment, selling billions in Amazon stock to fund it, that continues to attract top-tier talent and massive investment to Blue Origin. People want to be part of that vision.
So how is he translating this huge species-level fear into actual applications of Blue Origin day to day?
Well, their official motto is Gradatum Ferociter.
Latin.
Latin for step by step, ferociously. That captures it perfectly, right? A patient approach to the incredibly complex engineering, but combined with aggressive execution, step by step, but fast and hard.
Ferocious.
Ferociously. He strategically transferred leadership and culture. He brought in Dave Limp, former head of Amazon Devices, as Blue Origin's CEO, pulled in other Amazon veterans specifically to instill that rigorous, data-driven, hard-charging culture.
Trying to replicate the Amazon engine.
In a very different field, yes. And perhaps most tellingly, the money. He continues that profound personal funding, selling huge chunks of his Amazon stock year after year, pouring it into Blue Origin's very capital-intensive work, putting his money where his mouth is, big time.
The competitors here are also playing at the highest stakes imaginable, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The most obvious direct rival is SpaceX, Elon Musk. Head-to-head competition.
The space billionaires.
Right. Then you have the established aerospace giants, United Launch Alliance, Northrop Grumman, and government agencies like NASA, who are sometimes competitors, sometimes collaborators, often customers. It's a complex ecosystem.
So what's the ultimate lesson for you, the entrepreneur listening, from Bezos's leap into the cosmos, his final frontier fear?
I think it's about pursuing those lifelong passions, those grand visions, even if they seem crazy. Dedicate real time, real resources to the ambitious long-term goals that genuinely excite you, that offer a compelling picture of the future.
Don't be afraid to think big.
Really big.
Yeah.
And strategically transfer what works. Take your proven culture, your successful practices from one venture, and deliberately inject them into new ones to boost performance and still rigor. Don't reinvent the wheel entirely if you don't have to. And finally, just be prepared. If you pursue world-changing ambitions, you will face intense scrutiny. Public, ethical, political, it comes with the territory. So conviction, clear communication, and resilience are absolutely key.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've just traced. It really is something.
It's quite a story.
And that initial fear of regret, the fear that actually launched Amazon from a garage.
Yeah.
To the absolute terror of customer dissatisfaction that built an empire.
Yeah.
And then the dread of stagnation that pushed him to innovate constantly and now literally to reach for the stars.
Mm-hmm.
Bezos' story is just this powerful testament, isn't it, to transforming fear, using it as fuel. His willingness to face these fears head on, embrace failure is just data, a learning tool, and to continually challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
That seems to be what consistently drove him to, as you said, make history.
Indeed. And it really prompts us to think about how he, through his actions, constantly redefined what words like prudence or customer obsession or even long-term vision actually mean in the business world. He stretched those definitions.
Absolutely. So for you, our listener, thinking about all this, here's maybe a final thought to ponder. How might your own deepest fears, the things that maybe keep you up at night if you confronted them, if you managed them strategically like Bezos did, how might they become the most powerful catalysts for your own long-term vision? Your own impact?
Something to think about.
Have you ever wondered what truly fuels the world's most successful entrepreneurs? I mean, really gets them going.
It's often not what you think.
Exactly. Today, we're taking an extraordinary deep dive into the mind of one of them, Jeff Bezos. But here's the twist we're exploring. We're going to uncover how he didn't just succeed despite his fears, but often, paradoxically, because of them.
It's a fascinating lens, isn't it, to view his journey that way. This deep dive, it's not just a biography. Think of it more like a masterclass in strategic decision-making.
Yeah.
We'll unpack Bezos' career, from the garage origins of Amazon right up to Blue Origins, well, frankly, audacious space ambitions.
Right.
And we'll show how specific fears at each stage didn't just hang around. They actively drove his most monumental successes.
Totally. We've actually charted out 7 distinct phases. And for each one, we're going to reveal the clear signs of his fears, the, sometimes unexpected benefits they brought, how we applied these lessons practically, the competitors he was navigating around.
Always competitors.
Always. And most importantly, some invaluable insights you can leverage. So get ready for some serious aha moments, because this really is about turning those potential obstacles into powerful motivators for your own vision.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's unpack this right from the start. Back in 1994, we're calling this the Genesis phase, and it really centers around Bezos' fear of regret, of inaction.
The classic what if.
Right. He was this well-paid vice president at D.E. Shaw & Co., big finance job, and he's facing this massive choice. Stay secure, keep the money flowing, or take this huge leap into the completely unknown internet.
Which was tiny then, relatively speaking.
Tiny. And his decision to quit, launch